I'm Justin Davis, and this is Drone Camps RC. Hey guys, welcome back to the Drone Camps channel. I'm Justin Davis, and today we're going to talk about the Xiaomi 4K drone, how it's holding up after 6 months of operation. We're going to talk about some of the modes. We're going to go over the aircraft frame for you, and I'm going to give you some insight on the pros and cons of the Xiaomi drone versus something like the DJI Mavic or the Phantom 4 Pro. Is this a viable competitor? Is it something that you should sink your hard-earned money into, or is it just another China clone that's just going to waste your time and your efforts into aerial photography? So we're going to go ahead, break it down for you inside the studio, and then we're going to go outside. We're going to do some line of sight flight tests, and then we'll do some aerial photography and some video with this new 4K camera, and I'll show you how good it actually looks. Now, before we get started checking out some of the aircraft features of the Xiaomi 4K version, let's go ahead and take a little compare and contrast just for scale. This isn't really a comparison video, versus Mavic, versus Phantom 4 Pro, versus the 4K Mi Drone. We're just going to show you some scale here so you can get some idea of how big the Xiaomi drone is next to something like the Phantom 4K. It's actually quite a large size, so we'll just go ahead and set those rotors flat and look at how much taller it is. It's much wider, and we'll check out how much taller it is from the side. Show you guys a front view here. Look at that. It's much larger. However, the legs do fold down on this Xiaomi drone, and not only the props removable, of course, but also the gimbal is also detachable. That's something else that you're not going to get when you get some type of DJI drone. If I crash this drone and I tear up this gimbal, but the drone and the aircraft and the landing gear are okay, I can buy a new gimbal and slap it on here with this one because it quick releases and disconnects off the bottom of the drone. There's a little button right here if you flip the drone over, and I'll show you how quickly it comes off. Just like that. It's already off. No wires hanging off of it or anything. There's just a little cable underneath that sits into a little harness underneath and 2 snap pins in the back. It snaps back into place and it's ready to go fly again. So you're not going to get that with the DJI Mavic. I had a friend that actually crashed this one just the other day, and I'll just give you a little scale comparison there. I don't have props on the back of the Mavic, but a much bigger quad for sure. Way heavier than the Mavic itself. But my friend crashed their Mavic, and when he did, he tore up the gimbal pretty hard. And the problem with that is that this gimbal is all incorporated into the quad itself. So this is a very proprietary type of system. Once you tear up that gimbal, you have to ship off the entire quad. Now, without the gimbal itself, the Mi Drone will still fly. You can load up the satellites, you can take off, and you can fly around and do some line of sight flying. You could even sort of hard mount a GoPro on the bottom of it if you want to play around while you're waiting for some type of gimbal repair, or if you were just going to buy a new gimbal and wait for a new one in the mail. Same thing with the Phantom 4. There is no removing this camera. It's all built up inside and integrated. So one crash and these gimbals are both done here. Now right in the middle right there, I'm just pop on a new one. So no big deal there if there's no damage to the aircraft body itself. Now you've got a little bird's eye view of both transmitters right here, and this is the 4K Xiaomi on the left and the Phantom 4 Pro controller on the right. This one really hasn't changed a whole lot in quite a few variations of the last Phantom 4 and Phantom 3. Now there is some big differences between these two transmitters. This one does have this flip up section that mounts right in the middle. This mount right here will hold a pretty large phone, and you do have flip out arms here to accommodate any type of phone. You can flip them back in, and you can make this go all the way up by pressing the button on the side, and you can hold a pretty big tablet on here. Even my iPad Air will fit in there. Now, I always felt like this transmitter was just a little bit large though. Transporting it was always a little bit heavy. Now the Xiaomi 4K edition transmitter, it feels more like a gaming controller to me. It has that new 4K bling on here, this gold bling everywhere for the transmitter strap, the go return to home switch in the very middle, and this one actually turns on exactly like the way the DJI ones do. The antennas like to be folded down like this while you're flying, and you have a push button pop-up phone holder right here, which extends up to about like this. You can get a pretty large phone in there, but not some type of tablet. And if you push once and hold 2 seconds, this one fires up a lot like the DJI ones do. So you see a little LED display there of how many bars you have left for your charge. Now this one was kind of a bummer because it did take like 5 hours to charge this one up. So it does have that internal battery in here, and it lasts for quite a few batteries before you have to recharge it again. So that's pretty nice. And you also have 2 buttons on here, a lot like the Phantom 4 Pro does. They're also ergonomically right there by your fingertips. So as I'm flying, I have my index finger down here right on that button. I can start the video, stop the video, or I can take photos from here. Now this one is also programmable. C1 and C2 on the Phantom 4 are programmable. You have a nice little rail on this one as well. But this one is quite a bit heavier. I just feel like this one's probably twice as heavy as the Xiaomi 4K one. And when this one's all folded down and compact, it's way easier to transport this one as well. Just bend these around this direction. This one comes up and over just like that. And you have the gimbal wheel on the side right here, and you have an exposure dial over here, which can also be reprogrammed. Now on the very bottom of this transmitter, you do have a little bay here that opens up. Just take your fingernail and open it up. You have a USB port right here, and you have another USB slot right here. This one's for charging it, and this one's actually for hooking up to your phone while the drone is in operation. Now the new version of this does like for the antennas to be tilted out to get the best video signal and drone signal coming back from the aircraft to the transmitter. But this one is also nice because it does have that center return to home switch right here. And now the phone mount actually tilts forward, so I can get a little bit better view of my phone while I'm flying. That's kind of nice to have that little bit of tilt because the old transmitter did not have that type of swivel. And to turn this one off, you just press it once and then hold 2 seconds and it turns off. But overall, if I can just be honest here, I do like the simplicity of this one a little bit better. When I'm using these DJI controllers, a lot of times I find myself kind of looking around the side to see where things are, especially if I have a tablet in the way, because this is down and in the middle and it's kind of in the way of some of the buttons, especially if you have a large device on here. Same thing for this side. I'm usually turning to see what's going on over here. This is where you pause the drone. Actually, you can hit a pause button on this drone. Start and stop the video. You have your P, S, and A switch on this side, and you have gimbal wheel on this one, as well as some shutter support right there, which is pretty cool. But for me, again, this one is just kind of bulky. And I can show you from the side right here how much thicker the Phantom 4 Pro controller is than the Xiaomi 4K drone controller. Look at that. That is massive for packing it and stowing it inside some type of bag. Now you can also take these and screw these off for transport. Some people might not know this, but you can also get gimbal, 3D printed gimbal protectors, and these sticks are called gimbals. So if you're new to this, that's what these sticks are called. They're called gimbals, not joysticks. Now, don't get confused by that last part and think, oh, well, he's a DJI hater, but I'm not actually. I really like DJI stuff, but what I want to do here is I want to see if there's something that, for under $500, can do similar things to something like a Mavic or the DJI Phantom 4 Pro. Now, the DJI Phantom 4 Pro happens to be one of my favorite aerial drones of all time. Do not get me wrong there. That one is an absolutely stunning machine, but we're also talking about $1,500 when it first came out. Now, at the making of this video, it might be a little cheaper, maybe $100, but this drone right here is under 500 bucks, and it still shoots 4K at 60 frames per second. So that is really kind of a great budget drone. And actually, in my opinion, so far with this one and the experience I've had with it and all the flight time that I've had with it, the various battery charges and the different locations that I've flown this one has performed better than any other type of China drone that I've had my hands on besides a DJI. Now the motors on the 4K Xiaomi, they're 2212s, and they're actually perfectly sufficient to pick up the payload that they must handle during operation. They're really, really nice and smooth. Now with these props on here, these are pretty large props, and I'll just go ahead and measure them for you. We have a 10-inch prop on this particular quad, so you have quite a large surface area on this prop. Now the props on these 2212s, they're actually a quick release, and a lot like the DJI props, they just flip right off. Now there's a little mechanism up inside here that this little T-mount mounts right to, and the top part just locks right into place. And you have a little icon on the very top. There's a little lock and then an unlocked lock. To the right will actually lock this so you don't have any play right here, and the prop's securely fastened. And I'll just give you a little close-up to this prop so you can read what's on the tip there in case you decide to order one. This is the 01B1046 prop. And the silver ones on the opposite sides are going to be 10A 1046 props. And what I also noticed right away about the exterior design of the drone, it's pretty cool. They incorporated that gold bling everywhere. So you have sort of a Mi logo in the very middle right there. And you have vented gold arms, which is really cool because you want a lot of ventilation up inside the drone's body during operation. And on the very back, if we look at the battery too, the battery also has its own bit of bling on here as well. So you can see mine is pretty used, it's scuffed up, and it has that gold button right there as well. And looking underneath the 4K version of the Xiaomi drone, you also have more gold embellishments under here. Look at the gold vents here. You have them here on the ground sensor unit, and you have them underneath here just behind the gimbal. Pretty much gold everywhere on this version. But it's not all about the bling. As we know, what we're really looking for is a reliable drone and something that's actually going to take good video without a lot of jello and a lot of pixelization and noise in the video. And in a perfect world, we want something that breaks down pretty quickly and we can stow in a backpack for travel. We don't want to carry around something gigantic. One of the problems with Phantoms for me several years ago was the fact that I couldn't get the camera off, so I had to stow the whole thing together in different various bags that I came up with for airport travel. Now this one's pretty cool because it does come apart pretty quickly. Just going to release the props here for you so you can see how those come off pretty quick. So after you're finished flying, if you have some type of case that you have to put it in with the props off, you can do that. And then on the side you have these little clips right here. You just press those back and the arms fold out. And make sure these are locked when you go to fly, by the way. So push that one and it comes down just like that, and the whole airframe flattens out. That's pretty cool. Now on the bottom, if you look on the bottom right behind the gimbal, there's a little tab right here. If you hold the gimbal itself and release that tab, you can pull off the entire gimbal. And this is what I was talking about before. Being able to release this without any wires hanging off of it is a huge difference. So now that you released everything off the drone, you flatten out the arms, you can set it down, and now the drone itself, the aircraft, is actually flattened out quite nice. So now that it's all flattened out, you're kind of wondering what kind of dimensions it is, and I'll just go ahead and measure it for you. So your wingspan from end to end is going to be 15 inches across, so 15 inches maybe deep into your bag. And let's see the total width here. The maximum width right there is 12 inches, so 15 by 12, probably by 2 inches deep at the most there, just under 2 inches. And just to show you a little close-up of the bay where the gimbal snaps into, you've got this row of teeth right here that your gimbal needs to lock down into, and for security purposes you have these two teeth right here that stick out, and as I push on those you can kind of see that lever move. Now when you put your gimbal on, it's very important that this tab right here goes all the way forward. If it's just sitting back a little bit and doesn't go all the way forward, then it means that your gimbal could just fall completely off the drone. So that's something to think about when you're putting this gimbal on. You want to absolutely make sure that it's all the way forward just like that. And also just behind the gimbal right here, you also have this little sensor right here, and this is your ground sensor on the 4K Mi drone. This is your stereoscopic camera right here. It detects the ground, and you have two sonar options right there as well, side by side. And if you look at the very front of that unit, you can see that this one's also vented here. So you have that gold vent in the very front of the ground sensor unit, which is very, very nice detail. And also in the back of the unit as well. And I think one of the biggest benefits for most Xiaomi drone 4K owners is the fact that this one does just snap off with one snap, one little snap, quick pins, release it, and you can put this in your bag alone, you can pad it, or however you want to travel with it. That's great. You have some pretty standard rubber dampeners on here, and those seem to work pretty well. Now also what's really important about this one, the fact that you can remove it. If you crash it, you can just buy a new one. If this one gets torn up and the aircraft is fine, you can buy a new gimbal, pair it up with your drone, and then you can go fly and start shooting video again instead of waiting months and months for DJI or somebody else to fix your DJI drone. Because remember, the DJI gimbal is actually fixed into the aircraft itself now. Also, what I love about this gimbal is the fact that the wires are hidden way up inside here. So the wires are all protected here all the way around this gimbal, and that's really important. If you brush up against a tree branch years past, and even still some of the drones like I've just reviewed, like the Up Air 1, it has a gimbal wire hanging out the side. So if a tree branch grabs it and snags it, you have a broken gimbal. But it feels pretty solid in my hand, and it's pretty simple. On the back right here, you do have a USB port for firmware updates, and you also have your slot for micro SD cards. So make sure you're using a really fast micro SD card. Go to Best Buy and ask them what some of the transfer rates are for 4K cards are. Grab the best one that they have available and use that with this camera. You won't have any problems. And I'll just give you a little aerial view of both of the different props here. This is the Phantom 4 Pro prop next to the Xiaomi 4K prop. You can see that little gold embellishment there. And the very top of this prop, it actually does have that little turn buckle right there. You don't have that on the Phantom 4 Pro prop. It just turns over like that, and you have that little sort of spiral thing in there, and that drops down and locks into place. There's no turning mechanism on these. They also don't have any type of steel interior on these props, which made me always a little bit nervous, but these have been pretty reliable. Now this is a 9¼ inch prop, and this happens to be a 10-inch prop, so this one is quite a bit larger, and it does look like it has a thicker core in the middle, and they have bull nose on the end of this one, and they have sort of a softer taper on the end of this. Now characteristically wise, you're going to get a better flight time out of a prop that has a softer rounded tip than something like a blunt nose. If you have a blunt nose, when you do accelerate and go up, you're using more battery than if you had a nice tapered tip prop. So it looks like they might have a little bit of better design on the Xiaomi 4K prop. Now as far as the angle of attack from the leading edge of this prop versus the Phantom 4 prop, you can see this one looks pretty tapered on my left here, and this one is actually pretty aggressive. Look at that straight on. We'll just hold both of these there, nice and level. You can see the Phantom 4 prop kind of dips a little bit lower than the Xiaomi 4K prop. But unlike something like the Mavic Platinum, which is supposed to have noise reduction, both of these types of props are going to be a lot less subtle out in the park. So if you're flying either one of these drones, these props are going to have a pretty loud report. But your biggest advantage, either of these drones versus the Mavic, is that you're going to be able to fly these drones in more wind than you can the Mavic. The Mavic, you're not going to get much over 20 miles an hour. If you do, you're probably risking your drone. If you fly a Phantom 4 Pro, it is pretty heavy, and it can handle some wind. I've flown it in 25 miles an hour, as well as the Xiaomi Mi Drone 4K. Now the charger that comes along with the 4K version, it's pretty decent. It also does have a status light on the power supply itself. This is leading into your power supply for your AC outlet. Now this other end comes over here to this end, and it kind of looks like a little microphone, but what it is, little cap releases, and it shows you two little pins right there. Now the two little pins are on the opposite side, so you're going to take your battery, and you're going to see that either side has those types of pins on it. So which one do you choose? Well, just choose one and line up the pins on the inside there, push it all the way up, and now you're charging your Xiaomi battery. It's pretty simple. If you look at the battery display, you can see there's one light blinking there, and that was because I flew it all the way down to about 18% battery level. So this one's going to take a little over an hour and a half to charge up, and I'll be ready to go fly again. Now, unlike the Phantom 4 Pro charger, it does not have an extra outlet on there for charging up your controller. So you're just going to use a standard micro USB port to charge up your controller. And like I said, that one kind of takes a long time to charge up, probably about 5 hours. So I'd recommend charging that one the day before you go fly. Now the Xiaomi 4K Smart Battery is pretty nice. It is actually a pretty heavy battery, and it's going to get you in upwards of 20 to 25 minute flight times out of your Xiaomi 4K. And you also have that LED readout right here. If you push on the battery before you leave to go fly, you can tell that your battery's not been charged, or you have a full charge if you're all the way up to the last bar right there. Now it also has a little push button on the very top. If you press this, there's two little teeth, one on each side. You want to make sure that these teeth actually are snapped into place before before you fly, because the last thing you want is this battery slipping out. You'll have a drone just fall out of the air if that happens. But the good news for this drone is that this is a horizontal version for hooking up to the terminals, and in my experiences for over 5 years of flying drones, the batteries that are locked in horizontally do way better than the vertical design ones. Even you would think that with all of that weight and gravity working on the battery, that there could be no way that the could separate from the drone's body. But in my experiences, they redesigned a lot of drones to have vertical mount battery. But I have seen some drones with that same design just flat out fall out of the air and crash on the ground. So you have a nice design here for the 4K Xiaomi Mi. And last but not least, if you want to fly with prop guards, if you're flying around other people, dogs, animals, cats, turtles, snakes, whatever is moving and living out there, if you don't want to hit it, use prop guards. If you're just getting into flying, you should use them. I always recommend people use them for the first week or two. People would call my store originally when I had a store, and they would ask me, oh, should I get the prop guards? And if you're a new pilot, absolutely. They go on with a couple screws on the bottom. They're very easy to take on and off. If you don't like the fact that you have to remove them to put them in your case, that is only going to be a short-term option for you. You don't have to keep them on forever. So you can train with these, and they will probably save you a lot of headaches, and they might actually save you some broken props. So it's no shame to start out with a set of prop guards as a new pilot. So now that we've gone through most of the features, the app is really nice. It is very comparable to something like the DJI apps. It has a very similar type of feature. You can open up the map on here. You can see which way your drone is facing towards the home point. You can go into the open camera view. You can see a real-time view on here as well. You can go back to the map mode, and you can go in and change around the different camera settings. You can make it a beginner-only type of mode. You can turn GPS on and off. You can also do firmware updates from time to time. But one of the biggest benefits of this one is the fact that it doesn't ask for firmware updates all the time. It seems like every time I turn on a DJI drone, even though I love them, they always want to update the firmware, and it drives me a little bit crazy. They're always updating the no-fly zones, the no-fly zones, the no-fly zones. So you can also scroll down. You'll see other things like VPU mode, ADI mode, show perimeters, imperial units versus metric, IMU calibration. You can also do stick calibration, RC calibration, dial right mode, and Wi-Fi settings. If you want to pair up your Wi-Fi module with this instead of using the personal hotspot, if you want to use the USB connection with your iPhone, you can also do that. It's very simple to pair up. You can do that within a matter of minutes. You can also do gimbal calibration on here, change up your camera settings. You can change up the way the satellite map looks, and there's all kinds of other types of data that you can store or change on this one. And also, one of the coolest things about this one is that it doesn't act like a nanny drone and send all of your information back to Xiaomi, the head company in China. That's one of the biggest beefs that people did have with DJI, and I believe they just addressed that. They just changed around that firmware, but who knows how much data is really being sent back to the main company. I think that's a big concern with a lot of people right now, is privacy. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this battery on the charger and go out and do some flying. So okay, we're just gonna do a little line of sight flight test with the Xiaomi 4K real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and arm the motors and take off.